when those things coexist, there's a tension. And the tension is the capital will go to where it gets the best return. And so the job of our federal government when it comes to business is to get the heck out of the way. If someone stands up here, someone who's looking for your vote and tells you that he's going to go to Washington, D.C. and create jobs, you need to slap him upside the head. It is simple as possible. When they create jobs, I know what they're thinking about. They're thinking about a better bureaucrat or somebody at the TSA. Hey, they're great people. I'm nice to them because I don't want the second inspection. But let's be clear. Let's be clear. That is not a competitive marketplace. It's not a place where you can go grow America. What the federal government needs to do is simply set up a set of rules, protect property and contract rights, and then go away. Leave us alone. We'll do this. It reminds me of a story. It reminds me of a story when I was running. We had a business that was in the plating world, so we had chemicals, all kinds of chemicals there, and so we were highly regulated. OSHA was in there all the time. But every now and again, the EPA would come. And we started tracking every time they'd send someone different from the Environmental Protection Agency. The checklist was different. The rules were different. These folks had no clue what it was we were trying to do. And what they did was drive costs. We ended up having 3 compliance people to try and figure out how to respond to the EPA and the Kansas Department of Health and Environment. Good folks trying to do the right thing. But there's nobody like a business guy who wants to make sure to protect that environment. We had a huge vested interest in doing it. We did a really good job of it. This regulatory burden was just pure cost. And so when you're making a decision about whether to reinvest in your plating business, you know that if you grow it, you get another guy from the EPA. Not a good answer. There's nothing like somebody who has tried to build teams. That's what I did as a business leader. I tried to build teams because you don't do that as the leader of the company. You never make it work because you're so darn smart. And I appreciate that. You make it work because you build great organizations with great people, and you bring the most talented, most educated folks. You get them to work towards a direction. There's nothing that'll bust a team up like when the Department of Justice decides that some whistleblowers inside your facility trying to figure out how to make your business go away. I've seen it all. I've lived it. I appreciate that the federal government's role in the business is very, very, very limited. You know, I left the aerospace in 2005. I and my partners sold our interest there, and then was asked to go run a company that is in what may be the next most highly regulated industry, the energy industry. The company that I work for today, we sell equipment to the oil and gas drillers. And of course, my customers, small independent drillers all across Kansas and Oklahoma and Texas and across the world, are staring in the face of cap and trade. A piece of legislation that's going to attempt to regulate CO2 emissions here in the United States of America. First of all, it won't regulate it very effectively, and second of all, if you can imagine trying to get to a goal of energy independence, try doing it when no one will punch a hole in the ground in the United States. Truly, this bill in the 4th District, Kansas, will cost a couple of thousand jobs across the United States, somewhere between 15 and 20, just in this little neck of the world that my business operates in. North American oil and gas production will virtually go to zero if cap and trade should pass. But it's not just us, and it's not just the employees at Center International and their families that are impacted, but the agriculture community. They'll pay more for fertilizer. They'll pay more to put petrol in their vehicles. They'll all of a sudden decide, hey, I think I'll pass that cost along to the consumers. Shocking. So our food will cost more. This is a piece of legislation that was wrong from day one. And what it highlights is not only bad tax policy and bad energy policy and bad policy with respect to how we're going to grow our way out, but it shows the disconnectedness with the primary objective, which is to grow America, create something that's closer to energy independence. It just shows again how Washington, D.C. Walks off with a noble idea and turns it into a truth that is a horror. I'll close here. You can't turn on the television set today without talking about or hearing someone talk about health care. Susan reminds me, my wife reminds me almost every day that when I talk about that to you all, I have to talk in a way that is different from how I talk to my TV set at night. and she says that with a smile and a hi honey, just remember, but I think she's serious. And as I've had a chance to speak to folks, I always promise her, honey, I'll do that today, and I probably only got 2 times where I managed not to honor that promise. There's 2 things that I want to talk about. We can talk about healthcare at great length. It's complex subject. But here's what's really simple about healthcare. First, I cannot figure out why it's on top of the agenda. We've got a healthcare system that is imperfect. It needs work. In fact, as part of my volunteer effort with the Flint Hills Institute, we were working on ways to reduce the cost of healthcare before President Obama ever left Acorn and his friends. We were way ahead of that. We understood that the way you provide healthcare savings and create an effective healthcare system is to reduce costs. That means competitive, that means free markets, that means total reform. All of those things that we all know are simple fixes that will improve our healthcare system. But I can't figure out why it's on the top of the agenda when you've got 17.5% unemployment. And that 17.5 counts those that are classified unemployed and those that have either given up or are underemployed. That's 1 out of 5. I suspect here in South Central Kansas the number is pretty close to that. Our actual unemployment rate is just a titch under it. But instead of talking about how to create competitiveness and put Americans back to work, we're talking about public options and whether we're going to let docs earn a fair return on all of their investment, time and money and their education and sweat. And the last thing I want to say about healthcare is if you believe that the federal government's taking over that particular piece of America will reduce costs, I want to talk to you about my experience with federal healthcare. For 5.5 years, I received health care from the Department of Defense Medical System. Wonderful doctors, wonderful nurses, truly. They cared about my soldiers, they cared about my troops, and they were doing their best to take care of us. But they were doing so in this bureaucratic model, which made it impossible. We literally would walk into our primary care physician, or at least we thought that's where we were headed, and we would take a number, just like you do when you head to the baker or the butcher. You see a different doc, your medical records probably weren't going to be there for you to see them that day. It was waiting lines and queues, quality of care not to the level that you would hope for your family and your friends, and expensive on a per-patient basis. Today, even with our civilian healthcare expenses, somewhere between 1.25 and 1.5 times more expensive than you have in the private markets. And so, this is nothing against the good docs and Navy nurses. This is about a system that just simply doesn't work. And it's the one that this President, this White House, and Speaker Pelosi want to foist upon us. And I'm hopeful that they can hold the fort until 2010, until I and a whole bunch of folks like me get there. And we can make sure that it never sees the light of day.